Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So we've covered a tremendous amount of teachings over these past few days. And you can always revise it by reading books, etc. But in a sense, we've got to bring it into our daily lives. And that's where the difficulties begin. So I want to start really by what I think are the two fundamental attitudes that make life, that bring contentment and happiness to life. So the first one is forgiveness, and the second one is gratitude. Whenever we do harm, even if it's just a sharp word to somebody, you see, it's impossible not to feel a sense of self-righteousness. And with it, the sense of guilt and shame and ultimately remorse. Now, we might be able to push it down with that self-righteousness, but it's just within our nature to know that we've done harm, and there are these feelings of guilt and shame about it. It's just part and parcel of that delusion about self. No, they say.
Del sé, scusa,
Yeah.
del sé.
Of the it just comes with that sense of me, of being important. And just as that, there's a false premises beneath that sense of pride, when it's ever undermined, that's when you feel these negative mental states. So the ability to make to develop that facility within us to say sorry, make amends, ask for forgiveness is absolutely essential. Make amends. Yeah, the desire to seek reconciliation. And the reason is, of course, that the other person will hold a grudge. And there are consequences for any unwholesome action. This is what we understand by karma. So it's good practice to undermine that as quickly as possible. On the other side, just the easy ability to forgive when somebody's harmed us. Otherwise, there builds up in us this backlog of resentments. And I think that relationships, whether they are at work or a close relationship between two people, if these things are not sorted out, then of course it creates all those bad feelings, and eventually the breakup of that relationship. In the monastic order, every quarter moon, we have to get together and confess all the mistakes we've made. It depends on the group of monks that you're with. You join with another monk. You speak together, excuse me.
Yeah.
And in some traditions, you have to be very precise as to the rules that you've broken. So these are not your thoughts, it's what you've said or what you've done. But in other traditions, you just say you've broken so many rules in so many parts. And then the response is, do you see the harm you've done? And the answer is, yes, I do. And then the question comes, will you resist behaving like that in the future? And then you say, oh yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Assolutamente sì.
So what it means is that every 7-8 days, the monastics, monks and nuns, will get together to empty their hearts of any sense of resentment or feelings or the desire to ask for forgiveness. That's right. So unless you do that, then unwittingly these resentments build up until they overcome you. There was I read of a journalist who went down to see how dolphins were trained. And what she saw was that when a dolphin didn't do the trick, failed to jump through the hoop, the trainers said nothing. It was as though it hadn't happened. But when the dolphin jumped through the hoop, they made a great noise of congratulations. They blew trumpets. And so she thought, that's very interesting. So she began to treat her husband like that. So every time the husband did something that would normally annoy her, didn't say anything. No.
Non diceva niente.
But when he did something that was what was pleasing to her, she would praise him. And he changed. The relationship became wonderful.
He became a dolphin.
And then, of course, she went and told him the way she'd been behaving. So I'm sure he felt perhaps a little tricked by it, but he began to treat his wife in the same way. And they live happily ever after. Yeah, at least at the end of the article. So I just think that is so important in human relationship. Otherwise, it's like a cancer in the heart. And then perhaps the most difficult is, of course, to forgive oneself. And in a sense, you have to be able to talk to yourself kindly and make these resolutions not to behave like this again, you see. So this exercise we'll be doing tomorrow after the metta practice. And when we do the practice, it's a bit like you're preparing for an interview. Yeah, when you know you're going for an interview for a job, shall we say, you go through the interview in your mind, etc., etc. Yeah, so that when you go into the interview, at least you've got certain confidence. Of course, the interview never goes as you had hoped. But because you have that confidence, that's what comes across to the people who are interviewing you. So the exercises we'll be doing tomorrow has that ability to, as you say, to prepare ourselves so that we very easily ask for forgiveness and to forgive others and to forgive ourselves. And as you know, this is one of the fundamental teachings of Jesus Christ. And if you remember when they said to him, should we forgive 7, 8 times and then take revenge? No, he said, 7 times 7. In other words, all the time. The second quality is gratitude. And if you might not have done this, but if you start making a list of all the things that you've received without having to pay for them or even said thank you, you'll find a bookload of things. I mean, obviously, there's nature. When, how often do we thank nature for giving us our food, etc., etc.? And then there's our culture, which gives us our language. It gives us our history. It sort of it feeds us our connection with other people. It includes, education, which which most people don't pay for, they're just given it. And in our, in Europe and also in Western countries, just the health system, the caring system, no matter how bad it is, it is free, in a sense. And then there's our extended families, and then of course there's our own parents. Even if we think that they weren't very good parents, at least they gave us birth. Your mother gave you birth, they looked after you, they fed you, etc., etc. And then, of course, there's the Dharma, there's our spiritual offerings given to us in this tradition by the Buddha. And I think that when you make your list, you'll realize it's impossible for you to repay. And not that your parents or the Buddha would want you to repay. And what this does, of course, is it gives in you a great desire to give. And when the Buddha was talking to lay people, he always started with dana, generosity. He pointed out that even thieves can be generous. So somebody steals 100 euros from you, but was able to give it out to other people. And that generosity is two kinds. You can be generous with your wealth and with your time. And this, I'm just thinking, what have I written here? Oh yeah, the danger, of course, is that sense of pride about doing something like that. So, for instance, when you make a donation to a charity, even if it's a tap on your phone, really fill the heart with the right intention. So I'm making this offering for the benefit of. When the heart is completely full of that intention, tap the button. Because that action reinforces the right intention. Now, of course, the little devil will arise. Oh, you're so generous. Too much. Get some back. So, but we didn't reinforce that, you see. If you try to stop that coming into your mind, then you're repressing what is unwholesome in us. But these devils have to be liberated. So by acknowledging that, you say, you didn't fool me this time. Now, when it comes to doing something, helping somebody, again, you have that same sort of problem. So all we have to do is make sure that the heart is filled with the right intention, that's all. And there is always the danger of becoming, in English you say, a do-gooder. Somebody who wants to do you the good they want to do you. No.
È uno che vuole fare a te il bene che vuole fare lui a te.
Ok.
Ecco, yeah.
Quello che vuole lui.
Quello che lui considera il bene.
Ok.
See, whether you want it or not. And of course you can very easily upset these people. And they will go away thinking, why did they throw me out of the house? I was only trying to help. So this won't happen so long as we have the right intention. The right intention will move us to ask them what they want us to do for them. Now, every time you give some of your wealth or some of your time for the benefit of somebody else, you are practicing renunciation. Because you could have used the money for your own delight, you could have used the time for your own delight, but you have let go of that in order to help somebody. So now, this little virtuous circle of generosity, gratitude, generosity, renunciation is itself a path to liberation. Because it undermines that whole wrong view of self as it manifests as desire. So remember, in dependent origination, where you have that feeling and then the reaction to it of either acquisitiveness, greed, or aversion, that is the escape there, not to behave like that. And yesterday I was quoting the Buddha saying, we don't know the wonderful results of giving. And in the example he gave was the sharing of food. Okay. So then we come to actual daily practice, what we do during the day. So as I said, the Buddha begins with this generosity when he's talking to lay people, and then he talks about ethical behavior. So these are the 5 precepts that we have been repeating in the morning, and perhaps the most difficult one is right speech, because if we're not talking to somebody, we're talking to ourselves. So from the moment we get up to the moment we sleep, we can't shut up. We're always talking. So what we have to be careful of is that when we are talking to somebody is to be honest, to be truthful. And then That honesty, the one little area where we can slip away from honesty is a sort of exaggeration in order to impress somebody. So that's something that we often do really to satisfy our pride. The second one is that our speech should be kind. And the third one is that it has to have some beneficial reason. And the final one is to say things at the right time. So sometimes it is, we're being honest, we're being kind, we're trying to be beneficial, but we said it at the wrong time.
Sbagliato.
And that can cause more trouble than the rest of it. When it comes to indulgence, it runs right across all the pleasures of our lives. And so it's this, remember, it's this chasing for the drug of excitement. And it's very difficult for us to distinguish between just enjoying something and then slipping over into this extra bit of excitement. And that will be one of the struggles to the bitter end. How do you say bitter end?
La fine. La vera fine.
Then there's the taking anything which distorts or upsets our level of awareness. So again, it's remember the Buddha. What we get from the Buddha are not commandments. He won't make decisions on our behalf. So the actual translation is to undertake the training rule of. We often translate it as precepts, which is sort of in between, but the actual meaning of the phrase is training rule. So, for instance, drinking wine or beer does have an effect to some extent. So it's up to us to know whether we want to go there or not. When I began practicing in the Zen tradition, I used to go to it was a zendo that a woman used to be the teacher, where the woman was the teacher. Her name was Vajra, which means thunderbolt. And I used to call her my spiritual mother, which made her used to smile. So one evening, I purposefully went into a pub to drink half a glass of beer. That would be about half a litre. Something like that. Oh, no, quarter litre.
Un quarto di litro.
Yeah, a quarter, that's right. On an empty stomach. And all I can say is, I'd finished the drink and I was just sitting there, and I just felt this, like a curtain come over my brain. I could feel it. So that convinced me that if I drink alcohol, it's not doing my brain any good.
Al mio cervello.
So really, these training rules, it's good to use them as a touchstone when we're looking at our own behavior. And the third thing the Buddha would talk about are the devas, the heavenly realms. And really, what he's saying there is, if you practice generosity, if your ethical behavior is good, then you'll end up being happy. And if you find yourself being reborn, you'll find yourself in a heavenly realm. So in other words, the beginning of spiritual practice is to actually make ourselves happy. Then, when you're happy, you can receive the Four Noble Truths. And the first is, life is suffering. That's interesting. So he then used to go into his Four Noble Truths and then teach them how to meditate. Now, the actual basic discourse, which is called the jewel of the collection, is the discourse on how to establish mindfulness. And this talk was given to the Kurus of Kuru Sadhamma. So these were people who lived up towards modern Delhi, which gives you an idea of the amount of traveling that the Buddha did. It was all mainly on foot or ox carts. It was all the way towards Delhi, all the way down to present-day Benares on the Ganges, all the way up to Nepal and that whole area. He would be wandering around. And he had been to Kurusadama, which is that capital town, and had taught them. And then when he revisited, he was impressed by their behavior. So, for instance, he noticed that there was no well talk. So a well where you get water from. Which is that when people gather around the well, there's just a load of gossip. And he noticed they weren't doing this. So he then taught them this discourse on how to establish mindfulness. And that's, of course, an integral part of our daily lives to do the practice. And there are two times which have a lot of effect upon us. The first is in the morning, obviously. So what that does is it sets us in the right sort of in the right direction. It reminds us about our effort to be mindful. Now, it doesn't have to be 2 hours. It can be 10 minutes. It doesn't really matter. It's more to do with the quality of the practice. Yeah, I mean, you can sit there for 2 hours and be in Disneyland, you know, and then think, oh, you know, I sat for 2 hours. But it's a complete waste of time. So that's important for somebody who has regular practice. We do become lazy. And so in Zen, they always talk about beginner's mind. So if you remember how enthusiastic you were and how committed you were when you first start meditating. So it's trying to get that back every time we sit. And in the evening, before you eat is always better, because after you just fall asleep. So there you're really allowing any accumulation from the day to manifest and exhaust itself. Yeah. So, you know, little irritations, little anxieties, anything that you've collected is just a time to let that just appear in the heart and exhaust itself. And if you can, again, just do that for 10 minutes, I think you'll find it a very healing process. And there's also, you know, to really slow down before you intend to sleep. Coming off Facebook and then throwing yourself into the bed, it's not like there's agitation. Or a horror movie. At least a half an hour you actually begin to develop a quietness, a stillness. So this can be, you know, you can do it with music, preferably not heavy rock. Just sitting quietly, reading something which is inspirational, poetry.
Poesie.
That's a good time to read poetry. And of course you can always sit and practice metta. So really it's, you know, it's just a time to wind down and to establish a very peaceful mental state. And to reinforce all that, just to get in the habit of continuously stopping. You'll find some writers use the word pausing. But you see, for instance, you've had a telephone call and you put the phone down and then you go straight into the next thing. So whatever mental state we've accumulated during that phone call, we take into the next job that we're doing. Fine. Now, of course, if we've ended the phone call in a happy, peaceful mind, that's fine. But if you're irritated, the irritation goes into the next work you do. And of course, if you take that irritation and then start doing something with that underground irritation, then unwittingly you'll be developing it. And so it's the same with anxiety or sadness, whatever. So it's a case of just stopping, feeling what we've accumulated and just allowing it to pass away a little bit at least. And then you see, you have the time to make the next decision really consciously. And by the end of the day, you do feel you've been more in control of your life. And also, you find yourself having much more energy at the end of the day. Because what really draws our energy out are our emotional states. So, talking about work, what we do in our society, whether it's paid work or charity work,
So,
the attitude which brings joy is one of service. Now, just because you have an attitude of service doesn't mean to say that you can allow yourself to be abused. And I think that sometimes people, especially in the caring professions, find it hard to make that distinction. But also in many workplaces, which really are demanding more work from you than really you're capable of without causing yourself stress. And we talked a little bit about this yesterday with the, with how employers use mindfulness to help workers handle their stress, as if their stress was simply caused by their own internal mental states and not by the amount of demands that are coming upon them. And ambition doesn't have to be one of ego or pride. So often we think of people who are ambitious as being very egotistic, very self-driven, etc. But if your attitude is one of service, then you're offering your talents for the benefit of. And if you think that you could be a very good president of the EU, then you should make a go of it. And somehow to be engaged with society, with the world, in a much broader sense. Because remember, we are all interconnected, and what we feel, what we think, does have an effect on people around us, etc., and it goes out. Like dropping a stone in a puddle. So we have these huge problems, very complicated problems. I was talking yesterday about neoliberalism, and then the immigration and the fundamental causes for immigration. We've got this huge climate crisis and war, of course, in Europe. And perhaps you can bring in, the use of animals, vegetarianism. So these are all things that we ought to ponder and have some position on. And often what we can do is take on a very hard view or an opinion. I'm right and everybody else is wrong. And this moves towards conceit. So to undermine that, if we see our view more as a perspective, if we see what our view of things as a perspective, we may be open to other perspectives, which allow us to be a bit more subtle in our views, in our opinions. And it allows communication. Yeah, as you know, in the West especially, I'm thinking mainly of America, there's this huge political separation. And both sides are incapable of agreeing on anything. So this is not a good place, is it? Of course, when you open up to all the horrors that are happening in the world, there can be a feeling of overwhelm. So we have to be kind to ourselves. If it's too much, you have to stop the input for a while. So these are sort of little indications about daily life. You'll find lots of books now on practice in daily life. So what I want to do is end with an explanation of the refuges and precepts. I know some people here have already taken the refuges and precepts, and what that means is a sort of commitment to the Buddha Dhamma. So just like anything in life, in the spiritual life, at some point, a person has to choose a particular path. If we keep jumping from Hinduism to Christianity back to Buddhism, then all we do is confuse ourselves. So it may be that you feel you're at a point where you can commit yourself to the Buddha Dhamma. So it's really taking a refuge, which means a place you go to when you want help. So in the spiritual life, we do need a sort of touchstone. We need somebody or some teaching which is a reference point for us. And so the Buddha himself is the exemplar and the teacher. He's not teaching us the Dharma from some sort of intellectual, philosophical position.
Vale.
This was his personal experience. So the teaching comes directly from what he experienced and understood. And that Buddha is within us. So when you're taking refuge in the Buddha, you're also saying, I'm taking refuge in the Buddha within me. And the Dharma is that very teaching and the practice. So although we talk about Buddhism as if the Buddha himself is the core of our religion, shall we say, the actual center of our dispensation is the Buddha Dharma, is the teaching of the Buddha. And when we take refuge in the Sangha, we have confidence that this process actually works. It does actually lead to the end of suffering. So there are, occasionally people who make it to the end, become arahats, become fully liberated. And there are many people who are at the lower level of spiritual attainments. So the word Sangha is also used for the monastic orders. But you're not taking refuge in ordinary monks and nuns.
Okay.
Now that'd be a big mistake. You're taking refuge in those people who are the noble Sangha.
Nobile.
And those are the ones who've intuited Nibbana at some level or another. And then you take the precepts as just a basic platform of the ethical life. And if you feel you want to make that commitment, you can make it just for 1 year as a tryout. And then after a year you might think, well, that's a load of rubbish. I'll do something else. But hopefully you won't, and you'll continue to renew your commitment. And if you do, I give you this lovely little card, look. And I write here all the details. And at the back I have the refuges and precepts which you undertake to repeat every day as a reminder. And I also ask you for a virtue that you would like to develop more. And I find the Pali word for it, and this becomes your secret empowerment word. See? So I shall leave a list out, and all I will need is your name, the virtue that you would like to develop, and the time you want to devote to this particular commitment. Somebody once put, till my birthday. And I said, when is your birthday? Next month.
Il mese prossimo.
I said, that's no good.
Ha detto, questo non è buono abbastanza.
Oh, dear me. And of course you can, those of you who have taken it on a yearly basis, if you feel confident enough to actually devote yourself for life, then that is also this is also an opportunity. And that's on Sunday morning before breakfast. And tomorrow we have all sorts of wonderful things. In the morning, on the last one, at 11:30, we'll do an extended metta practice, which will include this forgiveness practice.
Wow.
And also there's a small practice on how to develop determination, commitment. And in the afternoon, at the first sitting, 2:30, I do my fantastic healing exercise.
Regione.
Which will change your lives.
Totally.
So here we begin with contemplations of the body that the Buddha wants us to do. So there's the contemplations of those the parts of the body that make us disgusted. And then there are one or two other exercises, and then there's a contemplation on aging, sickness and death. So now, when we're really happy, we can turn the metta that we practiced in the morning towards the body. And there's a whole process to that.
Questo.
So that's what we do, and then after that we can. There isn't a ceremony for chiusura. Non c'è un ceremonia di chiusura. No, because we do it Sunday morning, you see, and then we can go for a passeggiata. So that's an opportunity just to share with each other our experiences. I can only hope my words have been of some assistance, that by your devotion to practice you will be liberated from all suffering sooner rather than later.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
That was a bit quick, the sadhu, sadhu. It should be very long and impressive.
Shall we do it again? Tomorrow.
Okay. So, yeah, it's good time. Take a break and come back.
Ci prendiamo una pausa e torniamo.